Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. I'm Dan, and this week I'm going to be doing something a little bit different on the show than I normally do. Normally I have guests on and we talk about whatever topic of the week it might be, but this week I'm going to be flying solo and I'm going to be talking about something that I don't usually talk about too much. For those of you that follow me on social media, TikTok, Instagram, and all those, you know that I like to do give and takes, and sometimes I do them with relationship coaches. I am not a relationship coach. I don't purport to be a relationship coach. Frankly, I think the whole term is ridiculous. But I do think that sometimes it's good to hear what they're having to say and give the other side of it, the men's side of it, because more often than not, those coaches are female or are focusing on female. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I wanted to do is have a little fun, and let me be upfront with this. What I'm about to say is not necessarily tongue in cheek. I think my tips that I'm about to give you are really good ones and ones that men need to adopt. But I don't want it to be like super serious. That's not my goal with this. Okay. So keep that in mind as you're watching this video. But what I'm looking to do with this, I'm calling this 5 new rules for dating and relationships that men need to adopt in 2023. And let's face it, I'm 60 years old. What worked back when I was dating as a teenager or in my 20s, what happened then no longer applies. We've completely turned that whole dynamic over, right? It's gone forever, I think. The days of meeting someone in college, you attend classes together, you meet someone, you strike up a conversation, maybe you're in a study group together, or you're hanging out with friends in college, you meet someone that way. That in-person meeting, those are gone, right? Other people meet at work, that type of stuff. You know what I'm talking about. Now there's a lot of online dating. It's become almost the norm, if not the norm. And then there's a whole bunch of pitfalls and all that. Along with that is, for guys especially, I think they're starting to realize, I'm seeing this more and more, especially with the guys that I work with and coach. So I do coach men, but I coach them after relationships have ended, right? I don't purport to be an expert on how to go meet the perfect girl and all that, although that is the gist of this video. But I do see the back end of it, right? I see what happens when men aren't careful when they're dating. I work with guys primarily that are going through divorces and family court and trying to help them to navigate their way through that. That's primarily where my men's coaching goes. My private group that I have, we're dealing with things in there like not being able to see your kids for sometimes months and years, dealing with being a victim of domestic violence as a guy. That's what I see. And I like helping those type of guys and helping them to navigate their way through that. But I also think, and in my experience of having done that for many years now, that a lot of what men end up facing on the back end when relationships end could be prevented by making a few changes up front. And that's really where I'm going with this, right? Again, I don't want this to be viewed as super serious. Take from it what you will. The ladies are not going to like what I'm about to say. I'm going to be point blank, right? They're going to hate what I have to say because I'm going to expose a few things and hopefully educate men. And that's really what I'm looking to do here. Educate men on the realities that men face in dating and relationships, right? The bottom line is for men at this point, and most men know this, dating/relationships have become pretty much risky and toxic. Those are the 2 words I would use. When you look at the data, it's obvious that there are huge risks for men of losing everything. They can face everything from not seeing their children, as I mentioned, to ended up in jail, right? If you've watched this podcast in the past, I've had guys on that ended up in jail from relationships with women they thought were terrific at first. And they've said that on the podcast. They never could have imagined that what was happening to them would happen to them because when they were first dating, they thought the person was great, right? And we all face that. There's no certainties in life. You could find the perfect girl and only to find out later that she's not, right? And that's kind of what I want to help you with this video, is avoid that. But you could also find one that is terrific but ultimately changes. It's not uncommon for that to happen. And I know it's going to sound like I'm bashing women here, and that's also not my objective. But we have to be reality. We have to face reality. We have to see things for what they are. And for men, the risk of relationships has become so bad that not taking some precautions up front is foolhardy at best. It really is. When you realize that 50% of marriages now end in divorce, everybody knows that. 80 to 90% of the time, they're filed by women. And why do they file them? It's not because of infidelity. It's not because of abuse. The percentages of those are very small. The most common reason why is either she's bored with him or an event that prevents him from providing, right? Job loss is a big one, if not the biggest one at this point, right? And think about that. If you are working and you lose your job through no fault of your own, and a few weeks or months later your wife leaves you because of that, does she ever love you? Is she committed to you? My argument would be no, she wasn't, because a true committed, loving relationship, you stand by one another through thick and thin, in richness and rich and poor, all the marriage vows, right? So men have to realize that. And one other thing that I think a lot of guys don't understand, in fact, when I'm talking with guys, I hear this all the time. They do know the marriages, and 50% of marriages end. What they don't realize is that, and again, it depends on the study, but anywhere from 60 to 80% of non-marriage relationships, living together, I call them serious relationships, those end. So, one study I saw, 60% of non-married serious relationships ended in less than 2 months. All right. So when you look at that and realize, okay, if 100 guys meet 100 girls, of that 100, somewhere between 60 and 80, I'm going to use 70 just because it's the center point, 70% of them that get into a relationship are going to lose that. That leaves 30. And then 50% of them, if they go and get married, are going to end up losing the relationship. That means your odds are about 15%, 15 out of 100. And people will quibble with those numbers, but take them for what they are, right? They're a swag, silly, wild ass guess. But you think about that. That means that 85%, and again, we can quibble on the numbers, but 85% of the time, you're not going to end up in a successful relationship. That's what men need to realize. And that's not knocking women. It's not knocking men. It's reality. And that's what this whole thing is going to be about. Reality. Okay. Now, I can tell you right now, I am going to have a ton of people who are going to go, oh, you're sad and lonely and you just can't find a woman. That's why you're this way, or a host of other things, because they're not going to like what I have to say. But I would argue back to them and go, prove me wrong. Take the emotion out of it. Prove me wrong, right? The other side of it is they'll go, you're just non-romantic. You have no heart, no feeling. My friends, romance is dead. It's dead. Now, does that mean a relationship can't have romance? Absolutely it can. But that's going to be few and far between these days. And that's sad. It didn't used to be that way. I think if someone asked me what I think is the biggest change in relationships right now, is that romance has died. It's become essentially a business transaction at this point. And seeing women talk about it online, watching videos on it, talking with women, which I often do, they view it as a business transaction. They'll never admit it because they want that Disney fantasy, right? They're going to go and meet their prince and he's going to sweep her off her feet and they're going to live happily ever after. That's the mindset they have. But behind that is, it's a business transaction. And if you don't believe me, ask yourself this: what is the first question in some form or another that women want answered when it comes to a guy or a relationship with a guy. Does he have a job? Does he have an income? What is that income? Where is it? How much is he making? What's the potential down the road? Now, a lot of them, as I said, will never admit that. A lot of them will. Now, I don't go on the dating sites. I have no need to. But back in the day, in the 80s, that was a common first date question. What do you do for a living? And a lot of the time it was genuine, hey, I'm just curious. But also they're assessing you. Can you provide for them? Look to now. You go on various dating sites, and I have guys show me different things all the time. I just laugh along, but it's almost always in there in the women's profile. I'm looking for a steady guy who has a steady job or some variation of that, right? He's taking care of himself. He's not reliant. Those are all code words for he's got a job and he's going to make enough money to keep me happy. I'm not knocking women for that, by the way. I'm just simply saying that's the reality. And guys, gentlemen, you don't realize that. You don't want to realize that. Because, again, I'm going to upset people with this. As much as women want that Disney fantasy, guess what? Guys want it too. In fact, I'd argue more. My belief right now is that men want relationships, good relationships, far, far more than women do. It's not even close. And unfortunately, it's that reason is why so many men end up living in one-bedroom apartments or studio apartments, eating ramen noodles, not seeing their kids for weeks or months, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's the reality. I know it's harsh. I know it sucks hearing that, but that's the reality. The Disney rom-com fantasy, we all want that. It's something we should all hopefully get at some point in our lives, and many people do. But as I said earlier, you got about a 15% chance of that. And when you do find it, it's like winning the lottery. And I know many people that have, okay? But that's why I say relationships involve risk. Add to it other risks for men. The risk of you, and I've had guys on that have been false allegations placed against them of abuse towards either the woman or the children and losing everything, going to jail. That is a risk. The Me Too movement has made it very easy. Remember, believe her at all costs. It doesn't matter what the proof says. If she says something happened, it is to be believed and he's charged. Remember, even if you're found innocent later, as my guests have told you, it lives with them for the rest of their lives. And that is a very real risk that men face when dating. And we need to accept that. Is it, 90% of the time? No, it's not. Who knows what the percentage is? Even if it's as little as 5 to 10% of that happening. Even if it's 1%, what if you're that one? Are you ready to lose everything? Potentially go to jail, be vilified and viewed as a horrible human being because she said so? That's the risk that's out there. And we need to accept that. One thing that guys do that a lot of women don't understand, and I don't think ever will, is one of our strengths is we can look at risk versus reward. Is a good, solid relationship one that's healthy and happy, something to strive for? Absolutely. That's the reward. But the risk to get that reward has to be assessed. It has to be assessed on an individual basis and overall. And as I often talk about many, many, many times, I just give information. My goal is to give you that information so that if you choose to get into a relationship with someone, you go into it with your eyes wide open. There are some fantastic women out there. In fact, I've made the argument before, the majority of women are fantastic. Unfortunately, there's a lot out there that aren't. That's the bottom line. So my goal with these 5 tips, these 5 new rules, is to help men avoid falling into those traps and really to find healthy, happy relationships, ones that are going to benefit both of them, both the man and the woman, and hopefully children when they have them. So before I move on, just one other caveat I want to make, and saying this up front, and this is an unwritten rule, I'll call it. So many men are diving into the online dating world. And I get it, right? We're all busy. It's tough. The days of going out to bars and meeting girls, or meeting them in college, or meeting them at work, because the risk is there, right? It used to be, if there was a woman that you worked with, hey, maybe she might be the one. Going up and asking her out in the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s, there was the risk of getting turned down. The risk now is she's going to report you to HR for harassment. That is a very real risk, and men need to understand that. So it's, quotes, safer to be online, but there's a whole bunch of pitfalls with that. So one unwritten rule I'll give before I get into the written ones is to say this to gentlemen. Don't just go exclusively online looking to meet someone, all right? It has its benefits, it has its negatives. That's not the purpose of this video. But I want you to keep something in mind, because I did a little research on this. Depending on the sources, right? The number of men on there versus women is somewhere between 3 and 4 to 1, right? So again, using 100, for every 20 women, there's 80 men looking. Add to that when you look at when they swipe, I think it's swipe right. I'm not on them. I don't know. I think right is when you like someone. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Sorry, I should have researched that. But it's something like 5 to 10 to 1, right? So for every 5 to 10 guys swiping, I think it's right, 1 woman will, right? So for guys. So looking at the profiles, guys will do it 10 times more roughly. So again, it limits opportunities for guys. And I'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I wanted to throw that out there. So let's get into it. What's the number one rule that I would throw out? And these are in no particular order. I just kind of have them in an order. But the first thing I would say to guys is no more expensive first dates. No more. Back in my day, the traditional first date was you go out to a nice restaurant, you have dinner, and then you go to a movie. No more. All right. The trend that's happening that I see a lot on the dating apps, and I actually seen videos from women teaching other women to do this, is to get free dinners, right? So they go on the dating apps and they just swipe on it. I just saw a video not too long ago. A woman had multiple dates over the course of a month and didn't pay for dinner for something like 20 out of 30 days. Because all she would do on the apps is go meet somebody for dinner. She never intended to have a relationship with them. And she was laughing about it and mocking these guys. And we're not talking, Chick-fil-A. We're talking high-end expensive restaurants. We need to stop that. That's on us guys, all right? If she's insisting on you spending a lot of money on a first date, it's a pretty good sign the type of person that she is. Either she's using you to get free food, which is often, or she doesn't value you as a person. She's looking at you as a resource for money or things. What are you going to do to provide for her? She doesn't really want to get to know you. She wants to know how much is in that wallet. Then she'll decide if she wants to get to know you. See what I'm saying there? So you want to eliminate that. You want this to be about getting to know the person. My advice and what I've done in the past, coffee dates only. Now, what do I mean by a coffee date? It could be meeting for coffee at a restaurant, a coffee shop, something like that. That's fantastic. It could be things like going for walks into a park, going to museums. Simple, non-expensive things in public places, by the way. And that's both for her protection and yours, all right? You want to avoid things like movies, concerts, hanging out in bars, anything that limits your ability to talk and get to know someone. Again, your focus, right? And this is where I'm going to go with a theme, and I want you to kind of play along with me on it. When you're looking for a relationship, I want you to think of it this way, and boy, they're going to hate me for this. Think of it as if you were looking to hire someone for a job. First date is your job interview. That's what you're doing. So think about it. We've all gone on job interviews. My case, I've hired hundreds of employees over the years. I've held thousands of job interviews. You need to think about it that way, right? So if you're in a movie, can you have a conversation? No. If you're in a loud bar, can you really? A little bit more than maybe a movie, but not really, right? Or concert or something like that. That's why you want a place where you can look at each other, have a conversation, ask questions. We'll get into that a little bit deeper down the road, and just get to know one another. All right. The first date is really to assess, do I want more? That's the way you need to look at it. Just like when you're interviewing for a job, if you're the interviewee, is this a place I want to work? If you're the interviewer, is this someone I want to bring in here that's going to be part of the team? That's the way you need to look at it, gentlemen. All right. Women are going to hate that. They're not going to like it, but that's the reality. That's what we need to be doing. All right. Some other caveats I throw in that. No more than an hour. So back the last time I was dating, I did the coffee date thing. And again, it wasn't always, sometimes it was go for walks or whatever. But I made it very clear up front. We are capped at 1 hour. And I don't care how good the date was going. I don't care. I would actually set a thing on my watch that would beep after an hour. And I would tell them up front, this is the reason I'm doing this, right? You want to make it clear that you're limiting it to an hour because of a couple things. One, it gives you and them an out. We've all been on bad dates. I've been on some horrific ones, okay? And you're always looking for that out. Women a lot of times will have the escape out, right? They'll have a text thing set up. And that, more power to them. I don't argue with that. I think men should do the same thing. But by limiting it to an hour, it gives you the opportunity to escape, if you will, if you need be. The other side of it is it puts a little, and I don't want to use this term heavy, I mean it lightly, a little pressure. In other words, you only got an hour to get to know this person, right? Whereas if you have 3 or 4 hours, it can cloud the judgment because, well, I spent a ton of time, but we really didn't talk about anything, right? It kind of focuses, there's the better term, focuses you a little bit more. And again, you tell them up front when you're setting it up, whether it's, meet them online, meet them in person, friends setting you up, whatever. All right. Look, I do want to get to know you. I think it's best if we go and let's meet for coffee, and we're going to limit it to an hour and just say it just like I just did, right? I want to make sure that we both are comfortable, that if we don't feel it's working right, okay, we don't have to worry about it, and we can part and have no ill will towards each other. And the other thing I would add to that is I would tell her up front, and it works for you too, if either of you feels right off the bat that it's not going well, you're free to leave at any time, and no ill will. And gentlemen, you have to take that to heart, right? If she looks at you after 10 minutes and goes, I'm not interested, okay, thank you, have a nice life. No anger, no ill will. You cannot display anything. I know it can hurt. By the way, if you were to do it to her, think about how she would feel, right? You don't want to hurt someone. You don't want to be hurt. Business transaction. Remember, they're looking at it as a business transaction. Look at it that way. And the other side of it too is you can put it as, look, and I'll use an example of that. So this is 12 years ago, 10 years, whatever it was. I was doing the coffee date thing, and I was using Match.com. So again, however long ago that was, I was going on dates, and I would say to them, look, we'll meet for an hour at various places and go from there. And I would say, you have the ability to tell me you're not interested. And I had that happen a couple times. Didn't bother me. I didn't let it bother me. Can I say it didn't? I wasn't like, what the frick? No, I did. But I also looked at it differently in the sense that I went, okay, that's one thing I don't have to worry about. I didn't find a relationship that was going to be bad for me. It's a numbers game, right? Better to lose, quotes, lose 10, but find the right one than marry the wrong one or get in a relationship with the wrong one right off the bat, right? You can't take it personally. You got to take the emotion out of it when that happens. And again, this will also make her feel comfortable and she'll be more likely to be herself. And as you're on this date, right, you want to ask a lot of questions and be open to her asking you questions. Think of it again as a job interview. You have to be willing to open yourself up. And guys, I know it's tough, right? You're vulnerable. We all know what happens when we open ourselves up. Does that mean you tell her the worst things about your life? No. But, if she asks you something, answer it the best you can. If it's something that makes you uncomfortable answering, just say, look, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version or something like that. Just be honest with her about it. Again, the point being, think of it like a job interview, and you want to find out up front if this person's a good fit for you or not. And the only way to do that is to have questions. Now, does that mean, as some guys have done, you walk in with a list? Probably not the best idea to have a 3x5 card in front of you with a list of questions. But you kind of know, right, what you want to know about someone. If you're a religious person, does their religious values match yours? Okay, I'm not a religious person. That was a non-issue for me. But there were women I met back in the day who religion was important to them. And I would be very upfront with them and say, I'm non-religious. If you want to partake in your religion, I will never withhold that from you or stop you or any of that. I'm just not going to participate in it. It's just not who I am. My second wife, even though we ended up divorcing, she would go to church. I didn't. And that was never an issue for us because I made it clear up front that I'm just not a religious person. And I'm not knocking religion. It's just not who I am. But that, again, if we didn't settle that right up on the first date and clear that up, why would you want to continue on? If she's hardcore, I'm very religious and I expect you to go to church with me every Sunday, why would you continue to pursue her knowing that? Because even if in the end you got her, it's going to have friction later and you're going to end up divorced. That's the mindset you want to have. And you can apply that to whatever. Politics being a big one right now. And I know it's a minefield, right? But again, if you have someone who's apolitical, doesn't care about politics, but you are hardcore caring about it, the odds of that relationship working are not going to be very good. Or if she's hardcore one way and you're hardcore the other, do you really think that relationship's gonna last? Is it even gonna fire off after a couple dates? No, it's not. Get it up front, get it out there, and then move on, one way or the other, positive or negative. Again, job interview, right? The goal is not to put someone on a spot. It's to just learn about them and let them learn about you. Which hopefully, let's say it's going positive. My advice would be, don't make plans for the second date right then and there. Wait. I see so many guys that I've talked to afterwards. The common story I get is, we had this great first date. We immediately made plans for the next one. It was so great. A few years later, they're in divorce court. Again, was that the reason? Probably not. But again, you want to step back because I've had guys say to me, I got blinded, right? The first date was so good. I jumped on a second date right away and that one went good, but I turned off my eyesight, right? I got blinded by it all and I didn't see her for who she was. Again, this is just slowing things down. So say to her, this was fantastic. I had a really good time, but I'm not ready to plan for a second date. What I'd like to do is just wait a day or so. I will get back in contact you and we'll go from there. It also gives her an out. This is a benefit to her also, right? Think about job interviews. How many job interviews have you been on where they hired you on the spot? I've had it happen, okay? I'm sure some of you will. But more often than not, they'll say, okay, thank you, and we'll get back to you. Kind of like that. Obviously, you don't want to make it blunt like that, but find a way to kind of say, I had a really good time. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. Something like that, right? The idea is you want to be able to go home and think about it. Look at it. Think about what you talked about. Think about the questions. Give yourself time to settle. So many guys, they just get wrapped up in that moment and they plow forward. We talked about on the podcast a couple weeks ago with my friend Kumar. He's talked about this too, where, in his book, he talks about, they go on a first date. The second date, they're in a relationship. The third date, they're signing up for marriage. That's what we're talking about. We don't want that, right? You want to be able to, as a guy, assess, right? Gee, she was beautiful. I really liked what she said about this. Some of the things that I didn't like, can I live with them? Do they still fit with my values? Can I work around them? Whatever it might be. You want to give yourself a day or two to think about that. If she doesn't like that, that's a huge red flag. If she's pushing you to immediately commit to another date, the romantic side of it would say you want to do that, right? But again, that could be a red flag. Might not be, but it could be. So you want to think about that. Just say, I had a really good time. I'll text you later. Something like that. And I know there's different rules. Back in the day, it used to be you had to wait 3 days. None of that shit applies. Don't worry about that. You do you. But give yourself at least, my advice would be a day or so. Sleep on it, if you will. So let them know you had a good time, even if you didn't, by the way. So here's the other side of it, too. Let me just jump to that. You're letting them down easy. You may know right then and there, you had an hour conversation. You know you don't want a further date. You don't want to humiliate them any more than you would want them to humiliate you, right? You want to be polite, respectful, treat them the way you'd want to be treated. And by saying, I'll get back to you, I'll check my schedule, something like that, you've taken that out of it, right? And then later on, you can say to them, and don't do it by text, but you can give them a call and say, I had a really good time, but I just don't think we're a fit. And I wish you well. Something polite like that. Let them down easy. It happens more to guys, because I've had guys say to me, oh, Jesus, she texted me and said she never wants to see me again. Or worse, ghosting. I think if you are a guy and you ghost a woman, I have no respect for you. None. Grow a set of balls, pick up the damn phone, call her, and just let her know. Be respectful. If you've ever been ghosted, you'll know what I mean, right? And I've had it happen to me many years ago. I have never ghosted anyone. I've had people get mad at me for saying, hey, I just don't think it's a good fit. It has happened, but the majority of the time, they just say thank you. It's all in how you approach it. If you're kind about it, polite about it, you're not going to have a problem. And again, if you disagree with me, by the way, I should have said this earlier, on any of this stuff, put it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I'm not a relationship coach. I don't profess to be an expert. This is just my thoughts. All right. Let's assume the date's gone well, right? You've gone home, you've thought about it. Okay, yeah, I want to pursue this further. So you set up another date. And again, date 2, think of it like a job interview. Now, somewhere in the first few dates, and I don't want to put a number on it. Could be the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever you decide. Here's another tip I'll give you. So I'm going to call this one rule number 2, which is, and I'm going to phrase it this way, but I don't necessarily mean it this way. You want to see her without her face on, meaning without makeup, in her natural setting, if you will. I don't know the best way to put it. Not, think about first dates. What do? We get all dressed up. We put our best foot forward. We look the very best we think we can. We do all that stuff, right? A lot of times that's the fake us. Sometimes it is the real us, right? Truth is, people are looking to put their best foot forward. Just like on a job interview, you put on a suit and all that stuff. When you get the job, you might be wearing a uniform or, a polo shirt or whatever. But more often than not, you go in a suit. And if you younger folks don't show up in ripped jeans, by the way, I interview people. I have hired many people. Just a quick side note that has nothing to do with the topic, but don't show up dressed in ripped jeans. If you have tattoos, I have no problem with tattoos. I have a bunch of them. But, if you've got a skull and crossbones on your forearm, you might want to cover it up on your first job interview. let them get to know you before you do that. Things like that. Same thing on dates, right? If you got a skull and crossbones that say death to whatever, she may like it, but again, you're putting your best foot forward on the first date, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But for those of us that have been married or in long-term relationships, that type of thing, you want to see her in her, as I call it, natural setting, as opposed to the person you see on that first date. Because let's be blunt, if you get in a relationship or get married, you're not going to get the fully made up in lingerie coming to bed every night. What you're going to get is the hair pulled back into the ponytail, sweatpants and a ratty old t-shirt, and, in some cases, face cream on back in the day. And I'm not knocking women for that, okay? But that's the reality. So many guys get blinded, right? They see that, quotes, perfect woman, appearance-wise. Same goes for you, by the way, in reverse. A lot of what I'm saying for men, truthfully, I would say the same thing for women. But you want to see who they are. And it's not necessarily about looks. I'm using looks as an example, but my viewpoint and what my experience has shown is when people are not dressed up, when they're, quotes, dressed down, or au natural, if you would, and I don't mean naked, but just their natural, normal day-to-day person, they let their guard down. They show you who they really are. I use this tactic, by the way, when I've interviewed potential employees. Same thing, right? They come in, they're dressed to the nines, they're interviewing, they've got their best foot forward. Okay, I like them. I'll set up a second interview potentially with them. I own gyms. I would have them come into the gym, show me how they train me. And I said to them, I don't want you to dress up to the nines. I want you to dress up as if you were coming into work. If they asked me how that would be, I would say polo shirt and a nice pair of pants. And I just want you to show me what you would do with a potential client, something like that. Again, it lets them relax, show you who they really are. And again, you want to choose an activity in that time frame that allows you to avoid getting dressed up. And that's where something like going to an expensive restaurant, you can and should do that at some point. But maybe, again, go for some casual thing where they don't necessarily get dressed to the nines. Or you either, right? You're showing each other who you are. Because let's face it, guys, sometimes we go to bed, we haven't shaved or any of that. We go on a date, you damn sure we've shaved or groomed the beard or whatever. Same thing. You're letting each other see who the other person is as they would be down the road, 10 years down the road when you're married, right? So many people get focused on that first appearance and think that's the way it's going to be for years to come. I can tell you, my friends, it is not. In fact, it is going to be so few and far between, you're going to look back later and go, what happened? Okay. My wives in the past, what I saw on the first few dates and what they were, dressed wise or acted later on was totally different. Some ways positive, by the way, some ways negative, right? So you want to be I call it in a natural setting, natural person, natural being, who they are. You will learn more about the person and whether you want to be with them in that type of setting than any amount of fancy dates. I'm just telling you up front. All right. And again, I don't purport to be a relationship coach. I've experienced this. I'm just relaying things that I've experienced and what's worked for me and what hasn't, by the way, mistakes I've made. Because I made a few. I've made more than a few. All right, let's move on to number 3. And this one, oh boy, gents. So I'm going to lose about half the guys right now that are watching this. Rule number 3, no sex on the first date, second date, third date, 5th date, 7th date. I'll let you pick a number. My advice would be at least the 10th or more date. Take sex off the table and tell them up front it's off the table. Now, I know a bunch of you just went, what the are you talking about? All right. But I want you to think about it this way. Again, relaying back to a prior podcast with my friend Kumar. he made a very good statement on that podcast and in his book that I couldn't agree with more, which is this. And it's an old axiom, actually. Women use sex to get a relationship. Men use relationships to get sex. So that interplay of sex from both directions blinds too many people, right? You're taking that out of the equation. You're also, by the way, taking what is often used as a weapon by women, sorry ladies, but it is, away from them, right? Too many men jump into relationships way too fast because they get blinded by sex. They meet a girl, couple dates in, they have sex, it's awesome. They have no idea who this woman is, but the sex was great, and hey, if I lock her down now, it's going to be great for the next 10, 20, 50 years. And then they find out later they're in a dead bedroom. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've had guys going through divorces tell me that exact scenario. In fact, I would say it's more often than not, okay? As I said, men want to be in relationships, and part of the reason is some of it's romance and some of it is they want that security, just like women do, right? But they also, in the back of their mind, if we're being honest, and we are, it's much easier in theory to have sex if you're in a relationship, intimacy, because sex is not just the physical act, it's the intimate act for guys, right? Which a lot of women don't understand. Whole other video topic down the road, all right? Women don't understand that men feel closeness by physical contact, which is sex, right? Yes, holding hands is awesome. Cuddling up is awesome. But that I don't want to get graphic with it, but that interconnection, if you will, of sex is what men need to feel that the relationship is solid, all right? Women do subconsciously know that, and they'll use it as a weapon to get that relationship, right? So they'll throw sex out there and try and use that to get the guy to commit to them, especially if it's a guy they're interested in. By taking that off the table, making it clear at the first opportune moment, my argument would be ideally on the first date, maybe before, maybe shortly thereafter, that you simply have a policy that you don't have sex in the first fill in the number of dates. I'll use 10 as my example, and that would be mine, all right? And if she asks you why, and I assure you she will, all right, because she's going to be floored when you say that, shocked out of her shoes, okay? Tell her this, and you have to be honest about this. It's because you want to get to know her first. You want to get to know if you're a match for one another, if this is a genuine potential relationship before you take that step, all right? It does a couple of things. Number one, from her perspective, it eliminates you as a player. All right. And if you are a player and play this game, and I've seen guys do that, I have no respect for you. You're despicable. Because I've seen guys use that as a weapon in reverse. All right. I'm not going to have sex with you on the first couple of dates, knowing full well they're going to try. And, but they put the word out there to kind of set her at ease. I know guys that have done that. It's despicable, in my opinion. But if you're genuine about it and saying, look, I want to get to know you as a person, and I want to get to know if we're compatible, and I don't want the physical to get in the way of that. I want us to honestly see one another, and sometimes the physical tends to blind. You do something like that, she's going to relax a little bit. Again, show you who she really is, because now sex is off the table. She can't use it as a weapon, but she's also not worried about you, hitting it and quitting it, all right? It puts her in the frame that you're looking to meet someone for a solid, long-lasting relationship, not a roll in the hay, okay? And if she's truly interested in you and who you are, she will not mind that. In fact, you're going to find a lot of women will come running at you when you do that. They're going to be, your chances of succeeding if you find the right one are going to go up significantly because, again, you've taken that physical aspect out of it. And I know how pheromones work. I know how hormones work and all that. It can be hard. but I've done this in the past and it does work, okay? It just takes a lot of the pressure off. All right? Yes, I get it. You want to have sex. You want to have that, right? I get it. I understand all of that. But what's more valuable to you? If you're a real man, not a player, and you're looking for a long-term relationship, is waiting a little bit the best option, or is jumping in the sack and maybe getting blinded and falling into a bad relationship the best option? I'm not going to answer it. That's up to you to answer because it's unique to you. Me, I'd rather wait a little bit, find out. Now, I know I'm just popped in my brain. I know some of you are going to sit there and go, oh, I want to know if she's good in bed right away. Step back and think about it. Job interview thing, right? That first couple of times she's going to put in max effort, as you will be. You want it to be good, hopefully, right? That might not be who she's going to be 10 years from now, or you're going to be 10 years from now, right? Better to slow down, wait. Now, I know some of you are all the other side of it too. Again, things pop in my brain while I'm talking. I'm not talking about this from like the religious, we're going to wait until we're married. If that's you and that's her, that's fine. I'm not judging that at all. Not me. That would not be something I would do. But you get where I'm going with it, right? Wait a little bit. Make sure she's the one. Couple other things that this benefits you with. One, how many guys do you know or have you heard of that met a girl, couple times, they go out, they knock boots, she gets pregnant, and now you're on the hook for 18 years of child support for someone you despise. You find out you despise her later on because you didn't get to know her. You were so focused on getting laid that you didn't look at the long-term picture. And guys, I'm sorry, we do that. I know a lot of guys are going, no, we don't. Yeah, we do. All right. I know of many guys. First date sex, she gets pregnant. And there are women out there, by the way, that are looking for that. I hate to say it, but that is a reality. There are women that are looking to get pregnant so they can get child support. Sorry. Is it a huge number? No, but they're out there. And I've seen the videos where they've coached it. Go Google NBA players and women, teaching women how to get pregnant by NBA players to make millions. Some of these guys, I'm not judging them for people, but I know of NBA players that have 8, 10 kids in 8, 10 different cities, right? You can go Google it, you'll find it. But you get the gist of it, right? God forbid that you have a kid with someone that you would never want to be in a relationship with, because that's going to be a nightmare scenario for 18 years, 21 years, actually the rest of your life, right? Slow it down, take your time, get to know her before you jump into bed with her. And then from there, make damn sure you use protection. I don't care what she says she's doing. There's an old political saying that Ronald Reagan had about the Russians: trust but verify. You need to apply that to contraception. If she tells you she's on the pill, you can believe her, but you better wrap it up, my friend, unless you want to have a kid, because you don't know for sure. Me, I'd ask to see the little dial thing or the box, because you can kind of tell whether they've been taking them or not. She won't show it to you, red flag, right? If she tells you she's using an IUD or something like that, you unless you're a doctor, how are you going to know, right? Trust but verify. Show me that you have one. If she tells you she's had her, I've seen guys. You're all looking at me going, you're crazy, Dan. I cannot tell you the number of guys that have come back to me. She told me she couldn't have kids. She had her tubes tied. She's pregnant. What the hell? Had I known, okay, that's my point. Again, does it happen to everybody? No. But it happens more often than you realize. One other side of this, too, is, and this is something guys need to be aware of, okay? Consent. So if you go out on a first date and you have sex, or a second date or third, and you have sex with her, even though she's consented at the time, she can retract that consent later. You might say she can't, but how do you know that she can't, right? There are guys out there that have gotten in trouble There are guys that have gone to jail. That's the reality. Even if they didn't go to jail, if they get arrested, that arrest goes in the newspaper. That arrest gets recorded in public record. Even if you're found innocent, that arrest record still exists. I'm pausing for dramatic effect right now. That is the reality. Arrests are public records. So the next time you go for a job interview, it shows you were arrested for SA, even though you were completely exonerated. Again, going back to guests I've had on the podcast, right? Jason, completely exonerated of everything, has a paper he carries with him to show that. But yet people Google his name, and the first thing that pops up is he got arrested for it. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So again, having more time, taking the time to get to know one another reduces that risk, right? Because you always have to remember she's going to be believed over you, all right? Even if she says yes at the time, she can retract that consent, and it happens a lot. Weeks, months, even years later, and she's going to be believed, all right? Frankly, to be honest with you, and I'm not so sure I'm joking with this anymore, I'd get a signed affidavit. I would go to a lawyer and have it written up that she's consenting. I would get video evidence that she's consenting. It sounds insane, and let's be blunt, there is nothing romantic about it. But you think back of all the guys that years later, these women are filing suits on them saying, he R'd me. Years, decades later, it's he said, she said. And Me Too movement has said, believe her first. And they do. So again, taking your time, getting to know the person reduces the risk of that stuff. These are the things that I'm trying to tell you, right? As I said in the very beginning, this is advice I'm giving, suggestions. You do you. Take this advice for what it's will. If you think I'm full of shit, that's fine. I don't care, right? But at least now you've heard it, right? All right, next one. Rule number 4. You might want to sit down for this one because the ladies are going to hate me for it. No long-term commitments for a minimum of 1 year. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not talking you can't be boyfriend, girlfriend. That's fine. I'm not saying you can't be exclusive. Absolutely fine. What I mean is you're not going to move in together, and God forbid you're not getting married for at least a year after you've started dating. Minimum year. I would postulate you maybe 18 to 24 months, to be honest with you. Why? Well, as I said, we always try and put our best foot forward. And that's not just on the first few dates. It's the first couple months of a relationship, right? It gives you time to see them. Are they really who they are, saying they are, or portraying who they are? It allows you to see them too throughout the year. People act differently at different times of the year. The classic one being holidays. How are the holidays going to go? Right? You may think you're hitting it off great, but you spend your Christmas day every year with your family, right? She does the same. Neither one of you is wrong, by the way, but who's going to win out on that? How are you going to handle that? Because relationships have ended over stuff like that. It has happened, okay? And I could give you a host of other events. You get the gist of what I'm saying. You want to take a full year, see how it goes. Maybe something in their job might raise a flag, or your job, or whatever. You're giving yourself time. You're getting to know the person. Again, you can be exclusive. You could say, we're not going to date anyone else. You can be boyfriend, girlfriend, but we're not going to live together. And let me clarify this, say that doesn't mean you have her stay overnight at your apartment for 20 straight days either. All right. You need time apart. That time apart gives you a chance to breathe, gentlemen. All right. Men get too fixated. I'm rubbing my eyes because I see this so much. Men find what they think is the right one. Men tend to go all in, and then they end up all out. Okay. Taking your time, assessing, going along, give yourself room to breathe. Give her room to breathe, by the way. You know, I say this from the guy's perspective, but this helps the woman too. She may look back and say, you know, last night was great. The past few weeks are great, but you know, he's just not the one. Better to find that out than you roll down the aisle. You got a piece of paper in her hand, and next thing you know, you're paying alimony for the rest of your life. Some guy posted on one of my videos. He got married in early 1990s. 3 months, he's still paying alimony. He got married for 3 months. He's still paying her alimony. Okay. Again, you're trying to just slow it down, assessing one another, getting yourself in a position to have long-term success. And I know it sounds like, again, I'm referring to a business or whatever. That's the reality. It is. Your son, when you get married, that is a legal contract. And the legal contract does not favor men anymore. In fact, there's very little benefit to it at this point, I would argue. All right. Speaking of which, once you get to the point where you're looking to, let's say, live together first thing you're going to do is you're going to spell out in writing, not verbally, in writing, who is responsible for what. So if you're going to move in together, you're going to get an apartment together, a house, or whatever. Who's responsible for what, how much, and all that. Put it in writing. My advice, and I've thrown this out before, you're going to have 3 bank accounts. You're going to have your personal one, she's going to have her personal one, and you're going to have your joint one, your combined one. The combined one is simply for household expenses, rent, food, utilities, all that stuff. You're going to put enough in that to fund whatever it is, right? But you're also going to have the rest of your money go into your account, and she's not going to have access to it, nor you hers. Why would you do that? Well, I know from experience, my first wife, when she left me, cleaned out our bank accounts. I was literally left penniless, and we had just gotten paid that day. So I had to go 2 weeks. I had no money whatsoever. I had to beg people and borrow money to get gas to put in my car. Okay. She cleaned it out completely, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Right. Later on, the courts did their thing, but for that 2 weeks, I had nothing. She literally cleaned the house out. All right. She left me a mattress and 1 pillow and 1 blanket. That's all I had. Every dish was gone. Every bit of food in the house was gone. All of it. And I had no money. And we didn't have credit cards at that time. It was a few years ago, okay? That's what I'm talking about. You don't want to be in that position. A fatal mistake on my part, and I take full responsibility for putting myself in that position. Having your own account gives you that ability that if something happens, you can walk away. Because a lot of guys get trapped. How many guys have you heard of? Maybe you've been through it yourself. I can't leave because I have no way to survive or financially afford it and all that. You hear it all the time. This is a way to prevent that from happening, okay? And it protects her also, by the way, all right? So again, 3 different accounts. You're going to put into writing exactly how it's all going to be, what percentages, all that stuff, and then stick to it. If you're going to get married, prenup. Absolutely get a prenup. And then abide by it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice, but I will tell you right now, most prenups are not worth the paper they're printed on not because the prenup itself is bad or the lawyer did a bad job. They do a fine job. Guys and girls void them almost instantly. Perfect example I've cited many, many times. You get together, you do a prenup, you get married. You then take some of your resources and use it as a down payment on the house. You just made that a marital asset right then and there. So that prenup is no good for that money. So, you get a guy that puts $30,000 as a down payment on a house of his money. It's not protected by the prenup anymore. So you need to get a good prenup, talk to the lawyer, and then on how to abide by it, and then abide by it. All right. Protect yourself. Again, I know this isn't romantic. Reality is, remember, 50% of marriages end in divorce, 60 to 80% of long-term relationships before marriage end. Protect yourselves, right? Rule number 5. And this one, I probably should have put it earlier. But I think it's because I think it's so important is what I mean to say. But especially if she has kids, by the way, you need to talk to her ex. So if she's been married before, if she's been engaged or anything like that, you do not want to just take her word for how the thing ended, what happened. They're not going to tell you everything. they're more often than not going to make it seem like they did nothing wrong. If you are having a conversation, because it always comes up, and by the way, don't do it on the first date, but if she blames her ex for the breakup and doesn't ever say she did anything wrong or admit she did anything wrong, that is a huge red flag. I cannot tell you how big of a red flag that is. And I can pretty much assure you, if your relationship ends, she's going to be saying the same thing about you, even if you did nothing wrong. All right. Again, using my first wife as an example, she tells everyone it was completely my fault. None of what she did comes out. And I'm not going to get into it here. All right. If you watch my videos, you know enough about it. All right. You don't want to be that guy. You want to have a good understanding of why. Now, she may be 100% telling you the truth, and hopefully she is. And if she is, she's not going to have a problem with you talking with the ex. This does not mean you spend 5 hours talking to him, right? You pick up the phone. Hey, can I just talk to you for a minute? Especially if she has kids. Because if she's a single mother and you're going to get in a relationship with her, you have just made a huge commitment. Because even though you may only be the, quote, stepfather, you are taking on responsibility for those kids. You need to know what you're getting yourself into. And if you believe all along that she did nothing wrong and he was this awful dad and all that stuff, and you find out later, too bad, so sad. She's got that document in her hand called a marriage certificate, okay? And yeah, you might not be on the hook for child support, but you can get on the hook in other ways. So you want to make sure that you understand what's going on, right? Or what's gone on is what I should say. And if she has kids, this is stuff that's critical. You want to see how she interacts with the ex. If the ex isn't in the picture at all, if she says, oh, he disappeared, another huge red flag, because guys don't walk away. Are there guys that do? Yes, it is so rare, few and far between. Women will tell you it's not, but I can't tell you the number of guys that have said to me, I want to be involved with my kids. My ex won't let me, and she's telling everyone I don't want anything to do with the kids, because that's what they do. All right? So you want to check into that. I can't tell you how she interacts with the ex is critical. Often you'll find out later she's an alienator, right? If she says he wants nothing to do with the kids and then he starts all of a sudden coming around, you're sitting there going, well, you told me he wanted nothing to do with kids. Then he does. And now you're there. What are you going to do, right? A lot of guys then get very protective. Well, why is he coming around? He's trying to get my woman back and all that. No, he wants to see his kids. All right. Remember, you are committing to help raise these children, even if they're not yours. All right. And the ultimate thing is this to keep in mind, because I've had it happen to me. If you marry a single mother and you get invested in these children, and I did, right? And then that relationship doesn't work out, she'll remove you from those kids' lives and them from yours so fast, your head will spin, okay? You might spend years raising these kids, and next thing you know, you'll never see them again. And let me tell you, the hole that leaves in your heart cannot be described. It's as bad as if your own kids were taken away from you, if you're any kind of a good step parent, all right? Pay attention. Listen to how she talks to the kids about their father. You start hearing negative things said to the kids, big red flags. Hopefully it's the opposite. You hear nothing but good things. You see nothing but good things. You talk with the ex and you hear basically it just didn't work out. It gives you comfort, right? Again, you're trying to eliminate getting yourself in a bad position. All right, couple final things here. One, I'm going to give you a bonus one. This is not one of my hard and fast rules, but it's something that I would be doing. You want to check out her social media accounts, obviously, right? If you think she's not checking yours, I got news for you. Not only is she checking them, she's got her friends checking them. All right, and don't think because you blocked her, she doesn't have somebody else, friend of hers, coworker, whatever, checking. You need to be doing the exact same thing, because she could be telling you one thing and you see other things that don't work for you on the back end, whatever that might be. Check those accounts, see what she's saying. If she's honest with you, you're going to know everything. You got nothing to worry about. Again, it's just a little bit extra to protect yourself. All right, let me wrap things up with a couple things. As I've said many times, I am not a relationship coach. I know a lot of what I've said isn't going to go over well. I know that. I know women are going to be infuriated by it, I'll tell you right now, because what I'm telling you as guys, does not help them in any way in the majority of the time. The biggest one, you take sex off the table, they've lost that weapon. They will hate that, all right? But a good woman will see it for what it is. You're trying to build a solid relationship, not have sex. And that these things that I've told you, all of these rules are designed for that reason only, to help you find out if this is the real person, the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, and vice versa. So if somebody has a problem with any of this stuff, those should be setting off warning sirens in your head all along. And if you're not willing to do the same thing, you aren't ready for a long-term relationship, my friend. All right? As I said also, this is a job interview process. That's the way you need to look at it. You are interviewing someone to spend the rest of your life with. You don't want to rush that process, all right? I've been C-suite level. The interviews I had to go through that, it was like, I think it was 5 interviews before I got that job. All right? It didn't happen on one interview, and I met with different people and all that. And there's other things I could throw out here as suggestions, but you get the point I'm trying to make. Slow and steady wins the race, all right? Look, I get it. Romance. We want romance. Guys, I think, want romance more than women do. I honestly do. I'm one of those, I always tell people, one of my, things that, you get these questions sometimes that tell me something about yourself that no one would know. I like rom-coms. I think they're awesome. I want that, type of relationship and all that. They're not reality the majority of the time. What you see on the Hollywood romance movies is not reality, okay? It's nice. We all wish it was the Disney World type thing, but there's literally millions upon millions of men who've lost their homes, their stuff, their cars, access to their kids, and a hell of a lot of their income because they were seeking romance and didn't step back and assess things, right? You need, as men, to put yourself first. It is much, much better to end up alone and be alone than get into a bad relationship or get into a relationship that ultimately ends. There's that old argument, better to have loved and lost than to not have loved before. I don't agree with that at all. Because on its surface, sure, I'll buy into it. But think about what happens to men post-relationships, all right? They get devastated. They get devastated emotionally, mentally, physically, and financially. And by implementing some of these, and again, I know this is not romantic, okay? This is the last thing we want to be thinking about as men. It's the last thing women want to be thinking about. But by implementing some of these, you're protecting yourself. Because as I said, my goal is not to find you a relationship, as these relationship coaches do. My goal is to protect you so that you don't have a relationship end. Because I work with guys every day that are going through the end of relationships, and I see what happens to them. I know what happened to me. I can't begin to imagine how someone who is like 20 years old and never been in a relationship, I can't begin to imagine how they can't understand, because I sit here now knowing what I know, right? I'm not sure I'm saying that right. I'm disconnecting there. What I mean is I wish I knew at 20 what I know now, because I wouldn't have ended up with 2 failed marriages. All right. And my second marriage, I have nothing but good things to say about her. It was just, we were not compatible. Had I taken a step back and done what I've talked about, I would probably not have married her. And she's an awesome person. Awesome person. We were just not compatible. Same thing on my first marriage. If I had stopped falling for the romance and all that stuff and stepped back and saw it for what it was, I would never have married her. And I wouldn't have gone through the hell that I did. And the funny thing was, my dad sat me down and tried to teach me. He tried, and I did not listen. And that's why I made this video, because these are the types of things I wish I had known. Things that if I had implemented them. Take from this what you will. If you want to implement all of it, great, that's fine. If you think it's all complete bullshit, but you've heard it, at least now you know. You can't make the excuse later, I didn't know, right? If you take little dribs and drabs and apply it that works for you, that's the best thing you can do, honestly, right? Because a lot of what I said may not work for you, and that's fine. No judgment, right? You do you. I always say that. But in the end, one final conclusion before I wrap it up. If nothing else, gentlemen, you need to protect yourself. You need, as I said, to put yourself first. It does not make you a bad person doing that. I know we are hardwired to take care of others, to provide, to protect. I get that. But the number one person that we need to provide and protect for is ourselves. And by doing that, we're then able to provide and protect better for those that we care about. We can't do a good job of that if we don't take care of ourselves first. All right, I'm going to wrap it up on that note. Guys, if you've watched this far, give me a like. Let me know what you think in the comments on all of this stuff, the different parts. Let me know if there's something you disagree with. I want to hear, because I'm open-minded and I want to get educated on it. I know the women are going to come at me with some of this, and I want to hear what they have to say, right? I hope that some of them will realize that what I've said guys need to do, they need to do also, all right? So comment, let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel, all right? I'm up on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple with the podcast. If you're not following me on my social medias, I am on pretty much all of them at this point, but the primary ones are TikTok, Men Need to Be Heard 3, and Men Need to Be Heard 2, TOO. I am on YouTube, Men Need to Be Heard. I am on Instagram, Men Need to Be Heard. Twitter is Men Need #2 to be heard. I'll put links below. You can go down and look at them. Follow me on that. I do videos pretty much every day. And sometimes they're the same video, but other times I put certain videos in certain places. Again, my goal with all of my channels is to just educate. It's to help men live happier, healthier lives. It's to share what my experience has been. I've done tons of research on things. As I said with this podcast, I bring guests on all the time that are experts. I've had divorce lawyers on. I've had guys who talk about relationships. I've had women who talk about it from their side, all these things. It's to give you information. Because if you're educated and you have information, you make better decisions. We all know that. All right. And that's my goal. So like it, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when the next podcast comes up, which they generally are up at 11 o'clock Sundays, Eastern US. Guys, thank you for watching. I truly appreciate all of you. I appreciate the feedback that I get. It means a lot to me when people say I'm helping them out. That's why I do this. I'm not doing it to make money, and I'm not making a ton of money, and I don't care, all right? I do this to help everyone out. Both men and women, to be honest with you, but obviously mostly guys, and really to help the younger guys, if anything else. All right, till next time, this is Dan. You guys have an awesome week, and we'll see you on the next time.